Back in those days, I was driving a fishing boat and doing mail and stores supplies to Tasman Island. And we were in port at the time, and my wife's young brother came down from Sydney for a visit. So we took him down to Port Arthur to have a look at the place down there. On the way down, this is by car by the way, on the way down there was a few little smokes in the hills behind, but nothing you'd even think about. And so we went down to Port Arthur, we did the usual tourist bit. On the way back we called in to the pub, the Loofra Hotel at Eagle Hawk Neck. We were going to have a beer before we headed back to town. And when we went in, there was a crowd round the barman right up at one end of the bar listening to a radio. And I said, "Come on, get away from there, get me a beer." And he said, "Shut up, John, come and listen to this." And the first thing we heard was Midway Point and Sorell are likely to be wiped out. I said, "What the hell is going on?" He says, "Oh, bloody bushfires, terrific bushfires." So I said, "Right," back in the car, and we took off. Well, I had my wife and our young baby, young son with us, and we went tearing back to town. On the way, the bushfire crossed in front of us, and we had to stop, back up a hell of a rate up the road until we got a clear go at it. And then when the fire went across, we went through behind it, and we found a PMG linesman and dipped a handkerchief in his knapsack spray and put it over the baby's face and kept going. When we got to Sorell, they wanted to stop us there because the causeway was packed with animals. There was a circus on, and they had them all out on the causeway for safety. And all the kids from the schools were out there as well. And they didn't want us to go through, but I explained the situation. My boat was in town, and I had to get back there. And so they let us go. We got back in, and when we got there, the first thing I did was go to the dock keeper and say, "Look, you better open that gate and leave it open, because we're not going out now." But I said, if this gets any worse, I can tell you that there'll be a whole heap of boats will want to get out of here in one hell of a hurry. And so they opened the gate, and we just waited and waited to see what happened. Well, after dark, we were asked by the lighthouse mob to take a trip down to Tasman, because Tasman had caught fire. And it was interesting, the nearest fire was 10 miles away on Cape Rowell, 1,000 feet up in the air. So there were some fiery branches going through the air that day. The Derwent, HMS Derwent had come down from Sydney, a screaming run down to put some guys ashore to help with the clean-up and everything. And I got 20 of these, which was my limit to carry. And they wanted to go, and I said, "We can't leave here till midnight because we can't do anything at Tasman Island until daylight. So midnight we'll leave." So anyhow, we had them all there, and when we took off after that, we got down, going across Storm Bay was a bit rough, and the blokes seasick left, right and centre. We got down there, and of course in those days there was a little rock offshore and a flying fox from a landing stage 120 feet up the cliff, and we had to take them in a few at a time in a dinghy, and we rowed them in to the pickup point underneath the flying fox. This was a pretty primitive system, but it was the only way to get stuff on and off Tasman Island in those days. And so we eventually got the 20 of them onto the landing stage, and then they found that the rack railway, which was a wooden railed railway line which carted stuff up and down to the top of the island, was burnt out, or partly burnt out, so that it wasn't operating. So they had to all hike up this one-in-one grade to the top of the island. This they did. We just went away, sat around the corner in the shelter and killed time until they radioed us a few hours later to come back and get them. When we did, they went through this whole business again and all back on board, then headed for Hobart. In the meantime, the change that saved Hobart, southerly change, had come in, This blew the fire back on itself and saved Hobart. But in the meantime, we had to bash it back to Hobart, and from Tasman to Cape Rowell, it was dead on the beam, and by this time there was quite a big sea running, and we were used to this sort of thing, because we did this all the time with the lighthouse run. We were always out in the nasty weather. And I had my wife and young baby on board, and if I'd been worried, I'd have quit. But we just headed off and took her through the seas. Anyhow, the lieutenant in charge wanted us to go into Port Arthur and drop him off there. And I said, "No, mate, I'm going to Hobart. You know, this is it. If I was worried, my wife and kids wouldn't be here." So we just kept going. We had a good old bash back to Hobart. Once we got round Cape Rowell, it smoothed off because the angle of the seas were different, and it was a lot easier to travel. When we got back, and I can remember him saying that, God, we wouldn't have to do it out in seas like this. You can't take a little boat like this out in this. And I said, "Hey, come on, mate, we do this all the time. We look up at the seas, you look down. You know, sit back and enjoy the ride. This is fun." Yeah, well, that's about that. My part of it. We put in a lot of time there, but we knew what we were doing, and we didn't worry. And those sailors, man, some of them were so sick it wasn't even funny. Probably never been seasick in their lives until I got in a 46-foot boat.